Vrindavan ki Bhagavad Gita ki, Shri Purushottam ki, Tirthapalam ki, Jagannath Bodhidharma ki, Gangamayi Jamunamayi ki, Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki, Shri Shri Radhasham Sundar Jua ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balarama ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Chandra ki, Nandarashra Bhagavatam ki, Goprema Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki, all glories to the Samaveda, all glories to the Samaveda, all glories to the Samaveda, all glories to Shri Shri Guru, all glories to Shri So, before we try to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, I had an instruction from my revered spiritual master who told me that we should offer prayers to the Bhagavatam, because as Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna Tuliya Bhagava, Vibhusa Vishwaya, that just as Krishna is Vibhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so also is Srimad Bhagavatam. And Pratishloki, Pratyakshu, Nanatakoy, in each and every verse, in each and every syllable, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's unlimited meanings. So just as we offer prayers to Krishna, we also offer prayers to Srimad Bhagavatam. My Guru Maharaj instructed me that before you speak on Bhagavatam, you should offer a certain series of prayers. This takes about 5 minutes. Please be patient. Narayanam namaskrityam dhanamschaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jaya buddhiraya Vedi Ramayaneshchaiva Purane Bharate Tata Adavande Chavande Chahari Sarvatra Giyate Mukam Gauti Vachalam Bhangum Mangayate Girim Yad Kripa Tamaham Bhande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam. This is a song they sing traditionally in Orissa, the Bhagavad Tungis in the villages of Orissa before the recitation of Bhagavatam. Paramananda Madhava Karunya Rishi Makaranda Say Makaranda Panakori Amande Babo Hari Hari Haringa Name Mangaleda Parikori Shakagora Say Shakagora Sadrasamita Triptasya Nyanyata Sadachipachi Krishna Bhakti Rasa Swarup Shri Madhavanta Bhakti Veda Shashvate Paramamaha Chari Veda Upanishade Jatakichu Haya Taramata Lenavyasa Korila Sanchaya Jai Sute Jairu Vishaya Vachana Bharavate Seru Slokanibana Jivera Nistara Lagi Suja Koilo Vyasa Mayavadi Vashismile Orya Savanaya Jahavadavata Bhada Vaishnavya Sane Ekanta Shrakaya Chaitanya Charane Bhagavata Jayamane Sejavana Sama Tara Sasta Ashwame Jame Babu Jama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya From Vrindavan Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 31, text number 22. Shriyam Anucharikim Tadartinascha Shriyam Anucharikim Tadartinascha Tvipadapatim Vibudam Shriyat Svapurnaha Tvipadapatim Vibudam Shriyat Svapurnaha Navajati Nija Pritya Vargatandraha Navajati Nija Pritya Vargatandraha Katam Mamu Utsijit Puman Pritya Katam Amu Udvisrijat Puman Pritya Shriyam Charitim Tadartinascha Vipadapatim Vibudam Shriyat Svapurnaha Katam Mamum Vishishijit Puman Pritya The goddess of fortune, Anucharitin, who follows him, Tat of her, Artinaha, those who aspire to get the favor, Cha and Dvipadapatin, rulers of the human beings, Vibhudan, demigods, Cha also, yet because Swapuranaha, self-sufficient, Na, never, Bhajati, cares for, Nija, own, Kriptivarga, on his devotees, Tanujaha, dependent, Katam, how, Amum, him, Udvishvajet, can give up, Kuman, a person, Kritagyaha, grateful. Translation: although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient, he becomes dependent on his devotees. He does not care for the goddess of fortune, nor for the kings and demigods who are after the favors of the goddess of fortune. Where is that person who is actually grateful and will not worship the personality of Godhead? Please repeat. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is self-sufficient, he becomes dependent on his devotees. He does not care for the goddess of fortune, nor for the kings and demigods who are after the favors of the goddess of fortune. Where is that person who is actually grateful and will not worship the personality of Godhead? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, is worshipped by all materialistic men, including big kings and demigods in heaven. Lakshmi, however, is always after the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though he does not require her service. Brahma Samhita says that the Lord is worshipped by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, but the Supreme Lord does not require service from any of them, because if he so desires, he can produce millions of goddesses of fortune through his spiritual energy, the pleasure potency. This very personality of Godhead, out of his causeless mercy, becomes dependent on the devotees. How fortunate then is a devotee who is thus favored by the personality of Godhead. What ungrateful devotee will not worship the Lord and enter into his devotional service? Actually, a devotee cannot forget his obligation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even for a single moment. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that both the Supreme Lord and his devotee are rasagya, full of transcendental humor. The mutual attachment between the Supreme Lord and his devotee is never to be considered material. It always exists as a transcendental fact. There are 8 types of transcendental ecstasy, known as Bhav, Anubhav, Sthayi Bhav, and so on. And these are discussed in the Nectar of Devotion. Those who are unaware of the position of the living entity and the Supreme Person, Krishna, think that the material attachment between the Lord and His devotees is a creation of the material energy. Factually, such attachment is natural, both for the Supreme Lord and for the devotee, and it cannot be accepted as material. Guruvede Guru Chandraya Adhikaya Tadavaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha. So I have to beg apology from all of you who are sitting in front of Maharaj and Manchi Prabhu and some of the senior women devotees, and I'm not a qualified person, but our spiritual master told us as a service that if someone asks you to speak, you must. So we're just a student trying to do some service for a teacher, and repeating a few things that we've heard. This is a very, very special verse today, a very, very deep verse, on a very esoteric subject. And we're very fortunate that we're in association with so many pure devotees that we can speak on this subject. Now, when I say that we're in association with pure devotees, some of the learned amongst you and humble may protest and say, no, it's not true. But it is true. And I say this on the strength of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary in Bhagavad Gita 9:31, where Krishna describes it, Apicha Siddharacharo, Bhajate Mamanandyavar. He said, you may have some persons who are durachari sadhus. They're sadhus, but their achar is not very nice, their behavior. They're durachari, they don't behave very nicely. But Krishna says that they're sadhus. He says anyone who's doing ananyata bhajan, one-pointed bhajan for me, is a sadhu. So you may say, I'm not doing ananyata bhajan. But Vishwanath may differ with you. He says that anyone who's not worshipping the demigods, who's not taking shelter of karma or jnana, who's simply taking shelter of bhakti, that person is doing ananyata bhajan. And in that sense, they're a pure devotee. So we're very fortunate that we have such an assembly here today. Rupa Goswami describes 6 different types of exchanges which are essential for the development of bhakti. And one of those, 2 of those, is Guyam Akyati Pritchati. We should inquire confidentially and we should speak confidentially. Sometimes in our movement it's a little hard to understand that because we're a preaching movement. Sometimes people, they say that ISKCON is a Kanishta society. And in one sense you have to agree with that. But actually, if you think about it, that's our glory. Because we're preaching to so many outside people, and some of them join, and some of them are us. And not all of us are completely pure in the beginning. So sometimes we're focused more on preaching than we are about relishing. So we're very fortunate when we have an assembly of Vaishnavas of this caliber in Vrindavan Dham. And we can speak something which is Guyam, something confidential. Because Rupa Goswami says we have to have that. It's not enough just to preach, you're not your body to everyone, and vegetarianism. We also have to understand something about Krishna. So this subject matter in the verse today is not an appropriate topic for people outside. Rather, with people outside, we emphasize that Krishna is Ishvara Parama. He's a supreme controller. Sarva Karna Karna. He's created everything. He's the cause of all causes. This is Bhagavan. But this verse today is saying something different. That Krishna becomes dependent upon his bhaktas, upon his devotees. This is a very confidential thing. Sometimes in our society, we emphasize preaching to the new people so much that sometimes even devotees, they say, oh, I shouldn't hear about any higher things. But we have to hear about something like it. Srila Prabhupada writes in the last purport in the Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says there that the devotees in this Krishna consciousness movement must read all the books that have been given. Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and others. He says, otherwise they will simply eat, sleep, and fall down. We have to read Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book. We have to understand something about Krishna. It's a very, very important thing. So, the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, in the last chapter, describes that Krishna is Bhakta Bhaktiman. He's a devotee of his devotee. This is a very, very special quality. We don't hear about this in other religions in the world. We don't mind other religions. Very good. You do your dharma, Bhakti Vinod, and Chaitanya Sikshamrita says so many different people are worshiping the Lord in so many different ways. Here in this room we have so many devotees worshiping the Lord in so many different ways. What to speak in the world. We don't hate them. But we should understand there are some different relative positions, even of the Supreme Lord in his expansion. So, Krishna, one of his most special qualities is he becomes bound up with the love of his devotees. Srila Vrindavan speaks about this in Madhya Lila Chaitanya Bhagavat. I'll sing this verse in Shankara Krishna response. Jahoite apanada para bhavoy Srimat Gupta Loke Say Madhagopya. I'm going to say something very confidential. That you're conquered by love, by the love of your devotees. And this, he says, is a great secret. It's something that the common people in this world, they can't understand. The common people in this world, if they do think of God, they think of him usually as the creator, the destroyer. Or maybe within Hinduism they think of him as Narayan, also the creator and the destroyer, someone who's full of Aishvarya and Gyanamoya, who's full of Gyan and knowledge. But very few people understand Bhagavan as a person. And that feature of the Lord, his personal feature, is supreme. And this is illustrated in Krishna's Braj Leelas especially. It said that once Nanda Maharaj and Rohini and the other inhabitants of the house had gone to the home of Upananda, Nanda Maharaj's elder brother, for some function. And they left Yashoda and Krishna behind in the house. And Krishna had gone out to play with some of the boys. They went to Brahmandagat. And there at Brahmandagat, Krishna ate some nothing, some dirt. And the boys, they went back to Mother Yashoda and they said, hey Mom, your Gopal, your Kana, he's been eating nothing dirt. And Mother Yashoda became very disturbed. She said, Gopal, is this true? And Krishna covered his mouth and turned his head and said, no, not true. Mother Yashoda said, let me see your mouth. Open your mouth, let me see. And Krishna opened his mouth. And you know that Mother Yashoda saw something very astonishing. She saw the entire universe. All the planets, all the demigods, all the different inhabitants. She saw Vrindavan, she saw herself and Krishna. But what's interesting is her reaction. It said that at that time, Mother Yashoda became frightened. When Arjuna saw Krishna's Virat Rup in the battle of Kurukshetra, he also became frightened, but in another kind of way. And Arjuna then he began offering prayers. Deva, Deva, Jagatpate, O Krishna, you're the God of gods. Dosha Kami Moladami, please forgive me for my offenses. Mother Yashoda was not afraid for herself. She was afraid for the Lord. She thought, some ghost is coming in my Gopal. So what can I do? I should call some Brahmin to chant some mantras and make the ghost go away. But that day all the Brahmins had gone with Nanda Maharaj to the house of Upananda. There was no Brahmins there. So Mother Yashoda, she's a very practical lady. So village lady, they know many things. She thought, I've heard that Gobar, cow dung, is very auspicious and it drives away ghosts. So she went out to the Goshala and she filled up a bucket with fresh Gobar. And she brought that back in and she started smearing all over Krishna's body. Krishna's hair down to his feet. Mother Yashoda smeared that Gobar everywhere. And then Krishna's standing there. With this Gobar all over. And Krishna was thinking to himself, everywhere else, that when I show my Virat Roop, everybody offers prayers, worship me. But here in Braj, what do? They smear Gobar all over me. This is not very good. He thought, from now on, I won't show my Virat Roop. I won't do this. So, Krishna, although he's a supreme Lord, he becomes subservient to his devotees. In the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, there's a story of Sudama Vipra, who was one of Krishna's friends in the school of Sandamani Muni. And he was very weak and thin because they had no money, they had no food. And his wife, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, out of concern for her husband, not because she was a nagging woman, but out of love for her husband, she petitioned him, you please go to Krishna, he's your friend. Now he's a big man in Dwarka. And you should go to him and ask him for something. And Sudama Vipra, Vishnu says, felt very unhappy. He thought, I don't want to go to my dear friend Krishna and ask him for some money. But then he thought to himself, but if I do that, I'll be able to have his darshan. Oh, very good. So he agreed to go. But then he said, oh my dear wife, how can I go? If I go, I have no offering to give to Krishna. So Gururaj Khan, Sri Krishna Vijay, says that his wife began looking through the house and she found some old, stale, moldy rice. And she wrapped it up in a black dirty cloth, which was all they had. And she gave that to Sudama Vipra. And I try to say that when he was carrying it to Dwarka, it was a long walk. And he kept it under his arm. And as he was walking, the sun was very hot. And he was perspiring. And so that rice became a little mixed with his perspiration. And he took a boat across the ocean to Dwarka. He arrived in Dwarka, and he was a little confused because he's a village man, and now he's in a big city. And he saw so many huge palaces. And he asked one of the chokidars or one of the guards, he said, which palace is Krishna's? The chokidar said, all of them. He said, okay. He said, which one is Krishna in right now? And he said, all of them. So then Sudama Vipra, he went to the nearest palace. And as you may know, he came in and Krishna was sitting there with Rukmini Devi. Rukmini is the original goddess of fortune, which is being spoken about in this verse today. And when Krishna saw Sudama Vipra, he jumped up. Oh, you please sit down on this bed. And Krishna washed his feet, sprinkled the water on his head. And then Krishna began speaking about their youth, their childhood times in the school of Sandamani Muni. And then Krishna, understanding that Sudama Vipra had brought something for him, but also understanding that Sudama was feeling very shy to give it to Krishna. Krishna asked him, he said, so you brought something for me? And Sudama couldn't say anything. How could he tell Krishna he brought this nasty rice? And he's looking around there in Krishna's palace and seeing an inconceivable opulence, which is millions of times greater than the opulence of Indra or Lord Brahma. And Sudama Vipra is thinking of this rice he has under his arm, and he couldn't say anything. And then Krishna suddenly snatched him He said, oh, you brought something very nice. Oh, it was Jiva Goswami says that Krishna, he took that rice, he was very happy. He said, this is the same kind of rice Mother Yashoda used to give in Braj. And he took a mouthful of it. And then he went to eat another mouthful, and Rukmini stopped him. Why did she stop him? Some people say because when she spoke next, she told Krishna that don't take this. If you take any more, already I'm obliged to give him so much opulence by what you've taken. And if you take more, then I'll have to leave here and I'll have to go and serve him. But Vishwanath gives another explanation. He says that actually Rukmini was not being so selfish. But the reason why she stopped Krishna was she saw, wow, this is some special prasad. Very special prasad. And there's a little bit left. And I have 16,107 other co-queens. And they're all going to want some of this prasad. If Krishna takes another mouthful, there won't be enough to give everyone. So I have to stop him. So then Sudama Vipra was so shy, he couldn't speak to Krishna what his wife had asked him to come for. And he left without asking him. And as you may know, when Sudama Vipra went home, he found that he had greater opulence in his home than Lord Brahma and Lord Indra. Vishwanath Chakravarti talked on Sarvadarshan raises an interesting question. He says that why didn't Krishna tell Sudama Vipra that he was going to give him great wealth? Why didn't he tell him? He says because Krishna was thinking to himself. Krishna was feeling embarrassed. Krishna was thinking there's nothing in all the three worlds that can equal this little handful of rice that my devotee Sudama wants to give me. And I know his wife has sent him to ask for some material opulence. So the only thing I can offer him is some insignificant wealth. I can give him the wealth of Lord Brahma, the wealth of Indra in this material universe. But that's nothing compared to what he's given to me. That little handful of rice. Krishna is Bhavagrahi Janardana. He appreciates the love of his devotees. Krishna is not impressed by the opulence of Lakshmi Devi. He's not impressed by the position of Lord Brahma or the position of Lord Shiva. Krishna, he describes to Uddhava in the 11th canto, Na tata na priyatama, atma yoni na shankaraha, na chasankarshano nashir, naivatma cha yatavava. He tells Uddhava that, Uddhava, you're so dear to me, because you're my devotee. He says, Atma yoni, Lord Brahma is not as dear to me as you are. Lord Shiva, Shankar, he's not as dear to me as you are. He says, Nacha Sankarshano. Lord Sankarshan Balaram, my dear brother, he's not as dear to me as you are. Nashri, Lakshmi Devi, my wife, she's not as dear to me as you are. Naivatma, my own self, my own body is not as dear to me as you are. In Bhavarta Deepika, Srila Swami's commentary on this verse, he says that Krishna is showing here how dear the devotee is to him. He says that Lord Brahma, who's his own son, and then Lord Shiva, who's his expansion, his Swarup, Sankarshan is his own brother, Lakshmi Devi is his own wife, and his own self are not as dear to Krishna as Krishna's devotees. And Vishwanath, he says a very interesting thing in his purport. He says that, wait a minute, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are devotees. So then how is it in the verse, Krishna is saying, Natata mri priyatama atmayona nishankaraha, that my dear Brahma is not as dear to me, Lord Shiva is not as dear to me as my devotee, but Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are both devotees. Vishwanath explains this. He says that the identity that Lord Brahma, that Lord Shiva, that Lord Balaram, and that Lakshmi Devi have as being the son, as being the expansion, as being the brother, as being the wife of Krishna, those conceptions are more prominent in them than their devotional portion. So Vishnu says as a rule that according to those things which are the most predominant, you'll classify something accordingly. According to whatever's most predominant in that thing, you'll classify it. So because the thing that's the most predominant in Atma Yoni Brahma, Shankar Lord Shiva, Sankarshan Lord Balaram, and Sri Lakshmi Devi, are their conceptions, their bodily connections with Krishna, they're more prominent than their devotional conception, then we identify them in this way. And then he says, well then what about Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda? They're also family members of Krishna. But Vishwanath says that in their case, their devotional identity is greater than their identity as parents. And thus they're devotees rather than just parents. And this is the nature of the love of Braj. Srila Sanatana Goswami in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he raises an interesting point in this regard. He says that someone may say that the Brijvasis are attracted by Krishna and they're bewildered by Krishna. But Narad Muni in Brihad Bhagavatamrita says it's not true. Krishnena navrajana kila mohitaste taisavya mohit bhavaniti satyameva gadva mayaiva sahivismita deva karyo nusmarita kiniti kritya moho katanchit. He says it's not true. It's just the opposite. Rather, it was Krishna who was attracted by the Brijvasis, and Krishna who was bewildered by the Brijvasis. Rupa Goswami in Lalita Madhav describes a very difficult thing to understand. We won't go in that direction. But he describes another Vrindavan section of Dwarka, where Krishna, there's a Vrindavan forest there. And he says that on one occasion, Srimati Radharani was with Krishna in that Nava Vrindavan forest, and they entered into a cave. And Nava Vrindadevi was there, and they were looking at the walls of the cave. There were different paintings on the walls of the cave. Paintings of different Leelas of Krishna and Braj. And as they were going along, they came across one painting which depicted Krishna tied to the wooden grinding mortar, and how he had freed Nala Kuvera and Manigriva from their form of trees. And then at that time, Navapinda Devi, she asked a very relevant question to Krishna. She said, I don't understand. You freed Nala Kuvera and Manigriva from their form as trees. So why didn't they free you from the grinding mortar? I mean, that's the very least they could do, isn't it? For thousands of years, they stood there in the form of trees. And then you went and freed them from their terrible bondage. So then why didn't they release you from that bondage to that grinding mortar? Krishna said, oh, very good question. And he replied, Tatsalya mandala mahena mamoridamna yakopi mandagarimanina mahi matra tanmuktaye paramabhanda vimokshanopi naham shame sakiparashatuka katatra. He said, it wasn't an ordinary rope that my mother tied me up with. It was a rope of love. And he says, although I'm famous as Mukunda, I give liberation to everyone. It's a little overrated, that title, as Mukunda. He said, because in actuality, I can't free myself from the ropes of Mother Yashoda. I can't free myself from the ropes of my mother, who's such a loving person. In the Hari Bhakti Sudhadoya, Krishna tells a similar thing to Prahlad Maharaj. Sadamuktopi bhadasmi bhaktena sneharaja. He says, although Sadamuktopi, I'm always liberated, but still I become bound up by the ropes of love of my devotee. This is a very, very important subject matter. We just recently made a new issue of our Krishna Katamrita magazine about Mahaprasad. And in there we gave many different stories. in Jagannath Puri. And there's one story we printed in there about one lady whose name was Nandi Mata. Nandi Mata was a little crazy woman living in Jagannath Puri. She's an old lady with a bald head, a devotee. And every day she was going to the Jagannath Mandir to have darshan of Jagannath, Balaram, and Subhadra. And Nandi Mata was a little eccentric. She had the idea that Krishna and Balaram were her two boys. One day when Nandi Mata went to the temple, she saw the Raj Bhog offering and the hundreds and hundreds of different preparations they were offering to Jagannath. And she saw the hundreds and hundreds of different sweets. And Nandi Mata became very concerned. Just like probably your mother also, when you were young, you wanted to eat so many sweets, your mother also became very concerned. She thought, this is very bad. If my boys eat all these sweets, they're going to get a stomachache. So she thought to herself, because she's a wise woman, ladies, they know some very good wisdom, these village ladies like Mother Yashoda and Nandi Mata. She thought, I'll make some bitter sod, some bitter spinach for him. And so she went home and she picked some spinach growing in her garden wild. And she cooked that and she put it on a stone plate and she hid it under a sari. Because in the Jagannath Mandir they strictly don't allow any outside preparations to be brought inside the temple. She hid it inside of her sari. And she went inside and she stood by the Garuda Stamba. She looked around and when no one was looking she kind of opened up her sari and showed Jagannath and Balaram that bitter spinach. She said, my dear boys, you please take this. And she looked down and it was gone. And she was very happy. And so every day she started making that bitter spinach and bringing it to the temple under her sari and offering it there. And every day it was disappearing. And she was very happy. And then one day she was coming into the temple. The chowkidar said, hey, what do you have under your sari? And Nandi Mata didn't say anything. She just started running, like some of our Hare Krishna Sankirtan devotees. She started running inside the temple, and the chowkidar became, hey, he started running after her, and he caught her, crazy woman, what are you doing? And he grabbed her and looked inside, hey, what are you doing? You can't bring this inside the temple. We have our rules. This is Jagannath. And he threw it away. And for Nandi Mata, that was a very terrible thing. Because she loved Jagannath so much. She was thinking of him as her son. So she felt very sad. And she went home. She lay down and went to sleep, feeling very depressed. And she had a dream. And two little boys, one was black, and the other was white, came to her in the dream and they were crying. And they were holding their stomachs. And they were saying, Mata, we have a stomachache. Where is your bitter spinach? We need to take that bitter spinach. You didn't cook this for us today. And Nandi Mata, she said, it's not my fault, it's your fault. You sent your chowkidar. Why did you send your chowkidar? And Krishna Balaram told her that anyway, you don't worry. You come again tomorrow, I'll make some arrangement. And that night, Jagannath came in the dream to the Gajapati, the king of Puri, and to the head priest. And he told them both, there's a very special devotee named Nandi Mata. She's my dear devotee. And every day she's bringing me this bitter spinach. And the chowkidar stopped her. Now, I want you to allow her inside the temple. So the next morning the king woke up and he thought, well, that's really a far-out dream. When the king has a dream, very often he'll go to a pandit or someone to ask what does the dream mean. So he went to the head priest of the temple. He said, I had this far-out dream last night. And Jagannath came to me and told me this thing. And the priest was looking at him. He said, I had the same dream. He said, oh, there's something behind this. So the two of them were standing outside the Jagannath Mandir that morning. And they were looking at everyone coming in. And every time some old lady would come wearing white with a bald head, they would ask her, Mataji, what is your name? And finally one lady, she said, she became really nervous. She said, my name is Nandi Mata. She thought, now I'm really in big trouble. Yesterday, Krishna and Balaram, they sent the chowkidar. Today, they sent the king of Puri. They had
priest now, I'm going to be locked up or something very, very bad. Lord Krishna Balaram joined me because under her sari she had that bitter spinach. And as soon as they heard her name, immediately the king of Puri and the head priest, they fell down on the ground and offered obeisances. And that poor old woman, what are you doing? No, Jagannath told us about you. You come, and they gave her a royal reception, brought her inside the Jagannath Mandir, and they offered that bitter spinach to Lord Jagannath. And it became a tradition in the Jagannath Mandir. At Nandi Mata Pitasar, that bitter spinach of Nandi Mata, and to this day in the Jagannath Mandir, they offer this every day to Lord Jagannath. So Jagannath is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's Atmaram, he's Abdakam, he's self-satisfied, he doesn't need anything. But he gets a stomachache. Not because he's eating too many sweets, but because he's eager for the love of his devotees. Because he's Bhakta Bhaktiman. He's a servant of his devotee. And as this verse describes today, Katam Mamun Udvisrijat Puman Kritabhya. That where is that person who's actually grateful and won't worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead? This word in this verse, Kritabhya, is a very significant verse. Krita means to do something. Yeah, in Oriya we have the phrase agya. Someone tells you something, you say agya. That's your order. So Kritabhya means someone's order. And it means someone who is appreciative of the order, the instruction they've gotten. There's another word, Kritagna. Similar word. Kritagna means someone who's not grateful. Kritagna also means a killer of the self. Krishna, his nature is Kritagya. He's always appreciative so much of his devotees. Krishna says in the Gita, according to how someone approaches me, I reciprocate accordingly. But in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, Krishna tells the gopis that Napadi Hamniravadya Samyajam Susada Krityam Vibudaya Saviva Yamabhajam Durjaya Geha Shrinkala Samvitshayataga Pratyatu Sadhana. I can't repay my debt to you. This is Krishna's solemn promise. He always repays his debt to his devotee. He repaid Sudama Vipra. He repaid his debt to Nandi Mata. He had a stomachache. But how could he repay his debt to the gopis? He said, because your love is spotless. You don't want anything for yourself. All that you want is my pleasure. And so Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is self-satisfied, Atmaram, he became disturbed. Because he can't reciprocate with his devotees. How can I reciprocate them? And our acharyas describe that in particular, that verse describes the love of Srimati Radharani and how that love for Krishna was so pure and so supreme. In Adi-Lila chapter 4, Krishna describes that love of Radharani. Chant Hare Krishna in response. Krishna said, I have my share of happiness. Of love, in our loving exchanges in bhakti, both the beloved and the lover and the beloved have some portion that they enjoy. He says, but the pleasure that Srimati Radharani gets by loving me is 10 million times greater. Tahavati koti guna radha premasvati. She gets 10 million times more happiness by worshiping me than I get. Vishaya Jatiya Sukha Amara Aswara Amavaiti Koti Guna Ashaya Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama. Vishaya Jatiya Sukha. I get the proper happiness happiness, the proper soup, that the Vishaya, the object of love, gets. But the happiness that the Ashraya gets, the abode of love, Srimati Radharani, it's 10 million times greater than the happiness that I get. This is a very, very confidential subject matter. And this verse today is describing how Krishna, he's always grateful to his devotee. And how the verse says that Krishna doesn't even care for Lakshmi Devi, the goddess of fortune. He doesn't care for all the kings and demigods who are after his favor. But Krishna loves his pure devotees. We sometimes ask a riddle. This riddle has 3 questions. And it's not a trick. It's a very simple riddle. It's very obvious. And by this riddle we can understand how much you understand of Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta. The first question is, who's the greatest devotee of Krishna? What would you say? Srimati Radharani. Anybody argue with that? Is there someone greater than Radharani? No. It's a very obvious answer. Next question, a little harder. What quality is it that Radharani has that makes her the greatest devotee? Our time's a little short. Krishna says here in the verses we were just reading that Srimati Radharani relishes Krishna so much. She gets 10 million times more pleasure in relishing him than he gets. That's Radharani's greatest quality. She relishes Krishna more than anyone else can relish. Okay, those are the first 2. There's other persons also in that bhajan. This is the kirtan of our sampradaya. And this is why in our sampradaya we chant Krishna and not Gaurana. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes Jadiyama Pratisneha Kakeshavaka Hare Krishna Yati Nirta Nagayaya Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Hare Jadiyama Pratisneha Kakeshavaka. He says, if you really love me, you'll love my instruction. Don't chant my name. Sometimes devotees, they come and they say, wow, I've got something really good. I have something higher than what Srila Prabhupada gave. Higher than what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave. Higher than what Rupa Goswami gave. You guys are chanting Krishna's name, but I have something better. I'll chant Gauranam. They say like that. And it's a fact. Gauranam, there's so much mercy there. But we have a better program than chanting Gauranam. What is that? Pleasing Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And Gauranga Mahaprabhu says, if you really love me, you love my instruction. Don't chant my name. Chant Krishna's name. Because he is Krishna. But he's coming to repay his debt to Srimati Radharani. And this is the limit of Mahabodhanaya Avatar, the last limit of his mercifulness, that he's allowing so many Yavana Malechas to come and help him to repay his debt to Srimati Radharani. This debt of bhajan. This is the kirtan of our sampradaya. So the verse describes Katam Amum Usujet Puman Kritakyaha. That where is that person who's not grateful, who won't worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Who is that person who's not grateful, who won't appreciate what we've gotten from Srila Prabhupada and from our Guru Janas? Kritakya means grateful. Another synonym of the word Kritakya in Sanskrit is kukur, or dog. The dog is someone who's grateful. We want to be a dog of Srila Prabhupada. We want to be a dog of our Guru Janas. And this is some lesson we're learning from this verse, that if we can become their dog, Gyane prayasam udapashyanamanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vardam. Lord Brahman, in the 10th canto, he prays to Krishna. He says we should give up all gyan. Gyane prayasam udapashyanamanta eva. What is our life? Jivanti satmukaritam bhavadiya vardam. The bhavadiya vardam, the Krishna Katha, that we hear from the Satmukh, the lotus mouth of a pure devotee. And Stani Sita Shuddhigatam Tanuvam Manobir. When you've heard that, you don't have to go anywhere. Srila Prabhupada said, you just come to the Krishna Balaram Mandir. He said, you don't have to go anywhere else in Vrindavan. He said, everything is here in this temple. You just come and you hear Krishna Katha every day. Stani Sita, you don't have to go anywhere. Stani Sita Shuni Gatam. Just eat what's in front of you on your plate. Just try to digest this Krishna Katha, this mantra, this kirtan. Tanuvan Manobhya, with your body, your mind, and your words. And if you do that, something very amazing happens. Krishna, who is Ajita, who can't be conquered, he becomes conquered by the devotee who hears Krishna Katha in that manner. And this is the Hare Krishna movement. This is Srila Prabhupada's society. We'll stop there. Vrindavan Srimad Bhagavatam ki Srila Prabhupada ki Samadeva Bhakti ki Amshakavati Sindhu So I think we're a little late. If any devotees have to go, please don't disturb your services. But if somebody has one or two questions, maybe we can quickly take them.
Hare Krishna. I came a little late, but I got some essence of your lecture. So, my question is related to the Goswamis in the Vrindavan, especially Ter Kadamba. It is said that there only Goswamis went, not Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, went to all the places, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu not visited Ter Kadamba. Is it true? तेल कदम में चैतन्य महाप्रभु नहीं पहुंचे, गोस्वामी लोग गए हुए हैं, महाप्रभु नहीं गए।
I can offer some explanation. Where did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stay when he came to Vrindavan? According to Bhaktivedanta Narahari Chakravarti Thakur says that he stayed at Imli Tal, which is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's favorite place. And it has something very intrinsic to do with why he came to Vrindavan and why he left Vrindavan. He came to Vrindavan because Sri Radha Yapanaya Mahimata Dusovanayaya Swayodi Vidya Dusovanayaya Sokyam Chashimana Bhava Kirti Sandhiti Lovata Bhavaja Samajana Sachivarva Sindhu Vindu. He had three types of greed. He wanted to understand three different aspects of Radharani's love. So to do that, he came to Braj. He went to Imli Tal. But when he went to Imli Tal, which is the same place where in Dwarkar Yuga, Krishna went looking for Radharani after Radharani had left the Ras Leela, and Krishna became desperate and began calling Radhe, Radhe, and thinking so deeply of Radharani, his Krishna Varna changed, and he became like Tapta Kanchana Golden. He became golden colored, sitting underneath an Imli Tal tree. That was 5,000 years ago. 500 years ago, the same Krishna came as Mahaprabhu, sat under the same tree. Only now he's in the mood of Krishna. He's in the mood of Radharani. He's not chanting Radhe Radhe, he's chanting Krishna Krishna. And an amazing thing happened. His Gaura Varna, his golden complexion, changed, and he became Krishna Varna. And then he decided, I have to leave this place. He came to Vrindavan so he could understand Radha Bhav. But he left. Why did he leave? Because he understood that for me to taste Radha Bhav, two opposites have to be there. Number one, it has to be done in Vrindavan, because Radharani never steps outside of Vrindavan. But number two, it can't be Vrindavan. It has to be Vrindavan, but it can't be Vrindavan, because Mahaprabhu, he's come to taste Radharani's mood of separation, and she's experienced in Uddhavakari after Krishna's left. So it had to be a place which is Vrindavan, but not Vrindavan. This is a very, very big subject matter. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, in one purport, Srila Prabhupada says that there's three places which are not different. Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur Navadvip Dham, and Jagannath Puri Dham. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that in Jagannath Puri Dham, Mahaprabhu was tasting the mood of Radharani and Uddhavakari, and that kind of separation. And those three places, according to our acharyas, we could give many pramanas here, it's a big subject, that Jagannath Puri Dham is Gupta Vrindavan. It's Vrindavan, but it's not Vrindavan. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came to Vrindavan to taste Radha Bhav, but he couldn't do it here because this is a place of milan, of union. And he wants to taste Vipralamba, or separation. Because if you have a debt to someone, if Nuhari Prabhu gives me $10 one day, then $100 the next day, what do I owe him? I can't say, here's the $10 I owe you. I owe him $110. I have to go to the highest denominator. So if Krishna has a debt to Radharani, how is he going to gauge that debt? That debt would be according to the largest denomination, which is after Krishna left Vrindavan. And Radharani the Brahma Gita is spoken in Udavakari. And Radharani is experiencing his Madhanaki Mahabhav. That's his greatest debt. So he's come to repay that debt. But when he comes here, he becomes Krishna. His Gauravana goes away and he becomes Krishna because this is a place of union. And he can't taste the separation of Radharani. Therefore he has to go to that place. He left Vrindavan then. And Kaviraj Goswami says he went back to Jagannath Puri, which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes as Vipralamba Ketra, or the place of separation. So maybe there's another answer to that. This comes to mind. Okay? So if anybody else has any other questions, you can come and speak soon. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada. Okay.